So excited to have you. The title of this event is that Black Minds Matter, Navigating OCD and Mental Health in the Black Community. So excited to be joined by a pretty exceptional influencer panel here with Tanaye White, Ciearra Tati, and Tyler Snead. The purpose of this event in light of Juneteenth is to really explore various mental health topics and challenges specific to the Black community, to raise awareness about mental health and OCD specifically, to break stigma, share some lived experiences from those here on the panel, and help to highlight access and the opportunity to receive evidence-based care. My name is Nisha Srinivasan. I am the VP of Growth here at NOCD, and I'd love to take a moment to really talk about why we're having this panel. And the reason is OCD and mental health in general are often so misunderstood, especially in the Black community, where misdiagnosis or underdiagnosis can be very common. And, there are certain complex factors at play, whether that's intergenerational trauma, systemic racism, or medical distrust, but there is really strength in naming it and really bringing the conversation to happen. And part of the healing begins with the recognition that mental health challenges do exist, particularly within the Black community, validation of that, and the importance of community and what role that plays. So today we'll talk not just about the challenges, but also the tools and pathways to wellness. And those are really rooted in Black history, culture, and collective strength. So with that, I'm going to first turn it over to our first panelist, Tyler Snead. If you could share a bit about yourself and perhaps your experience with mental health, with OCD, and why it's important for you to speak on it.
Okay, so hey guys, my name is Tyler, and my experience with mental health in general kind of started when I was like a sophomore in high school. And I don't know, I just noticed that I was feeling sad a majority of the time, a lot of the time. And then that's kind of like where my whole mental health journey started. And then I started getting therapy for that. And as far as OCD is concerned, I wasn't diagnosed with OCD until I was about 20, 21. So I've always had it, but I never knew that I had it because I was always being misdiagnosed for just having regular anxiety. And it turned out it was OCD. So my experience with OCD has been a roller coaster of different things. And I'm sure you guys could probably understand that if you deal with it.
Great. Thank you, Tyler. And can you share just where you're from? And I believe you're in college, yes?
Yes, so I am in college and I'm also from Richmond, Virginia, which I don't know if you guys know that actor Boris Kojo, I think. He played on Real Husbands of Hollywood. He's not from Richmond, but he went to VCU, Virginia Commonwealth University, and he played tennis there. So yeah, that's as special as it gets. And Chris Brown is from Tappahannock.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Ciearra, can we have you introduce yourself next, please?
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Sierra. I'm a content creator, a mental health advocate, and a mother of one. She's one and done, maybe. I'm based here in Columbus, Ohio. My content is based on conversations like this, right? So, mental health, healing, relationship with myself, my faith. I don't have a personal experience with OCD, right? But I am very intentional about educating myself on OCD. I think that it's important for us to educate ourselves on mental health conditions, even if we don't have the diagnosis or the experience. I have, however, been diagnosed with PTSD and anxiety, and after having my daughter, also postpartum depression. So for years, I've had to navigate those. And that is why this conversation specifically is extremely important to me.
Great. Thank you so much, Ciearra. And Tanaye.
Hi everyone, I'm Tanaye. I'm based in New York City, Brooklyn to be specific. I am a model, a mental health advocate. I also am the owner of Feel Good Babe, which is a community for young women and girls. And I'm also developing a mental health social media network to help people find community in and solitude and solace in anonymity of social media. That aside, I've had a lot of experience with the mental health space. I'm a person who has been fighting depression since I was 12 years old. I also lost a dear friend to suicide at the age of 16. So it's always been my mission to uplift others, but also to bring more awareness to the mental health space.
Great, thank you so much. And as you can see, we have a pretty exceptional panel here, really diverse experience and different connection to mental health and to OCD, whether that's lived experience or advocacy. One thing I'll note before we kind of get into our discussion is we are not clinicians. So this panel is really intended to share lived experience, personal perspective, but certainly we will provide adequate resources should you want more information or clinical help. On that note, I think where we'd like to start is really this idea of stigma around mental health. It can be really incredibly difficult when navigating misconceptions, when there's stigma around even the seriousness of mental health and OCD, and if that even warrants getting help. And so let's start with Tanae, how has stigma around mental health shown up in your family, culture, community?
Yeah, I would say that my family fits into what a lot of Black families experience where we don't address mental health. For me growing up, my parents were incredibly supportive in every way. But when it came to mental health, it wasn't something that was necessarily talked about because it wasn't understood. And same for my parents. They both grew up in inner city housing, Section 8, and the stress that their parents raised them on was to just be successful at no matter the cost. So when it came to time to, address mental health, especially as I started growing up, it just was something that wasn't addressed. It was walked around. I think a lot of Black families often, use the phrases "pray about it" if you don't feel good, or work harder. You must not be, working hard enough. If you're feeling sad, like you're depressed, depress them dishes. Those are a lot of the phrases that we've heard in our community. And so for me, once it came to a point of mental health really impacting my life, where, I lost a friend to suicide, I had bouts of suicidal ideation myself, and then depression really hit me very hard after I graduated from college. I decided to be more vocal about it and stop hiding from it. A lot of my youth was hiding from it simply because I felt alone. I didn't feel like anyone else was going through what I went through. And then as I got older, I found my voice and I decided to use that to bring more awareness to what depression looks like, what mental health is exactly, and remind others that, like, you may be going through this, you're not alone, but also to highlight how mental health is woven into every crevice of our lives. Additionally, I have been diagnosed with ADHD at a late age, 32. I'm 33 now. So for a year now, I've been aware that I have ADHD, and even that has been a huge learning curve. And now that I have the resources that have finally made me what I feel like is a fully productive adult, I just feel like even that just plays a lot into my mission to just bring more awareness to what mental health is and what it looks like.
Well, it's incredible. Thank you for being so vulnerable and open with kind of sharing your experience about how mental health has appeared for you, for your family, and also how um, there can be this reluctance to talk about it or even to acknowledge that it exists. Um, Tyler, let's move to you on in the spirit of stigma, there's also a lot of common misconceptions around mental health. Um, is there something that you'd like to maybe share in terms of your experience or what you've seen in the Black community around misconceptions, either with mental health conditions generally or with OCD specifically?
Well, a lot of the stigma and misconceptions that I face personally and just what I've seen other people deal with that also are dealing with mental health when they're especially around like, the African American community and just all of that. A lot of the time, they feel as though because you can't see the ailment, that it doesn't exist. Um, and again, that all comes from like that lack of knowledge, and just simply not knowing that sometimes it can be a chemical imbalance in your brain. Um, it can be situational. Anyone can feel depressed, or it doesn't matter what color you are, but anybody can have OCD. And OCD gets a lot of misrepresentation in the media as well. It's always seen as like the cleaning disorder, or, it's always seen as quirky. And a lot of people use it as an adjective, like, oh, I'm so OCD, like, but that's a lot of the time that's not what OCD is. OCD is not something that somebody likes to do, and it's not a quirk or like a personality trait. It's debilitating. So not only is it misrepresented, but then you also have the Black community, which a lot of the time they don't take mental health as seriously. So you've got both of those things working against you. So now you're Black and you got OCD and you don't even know it. Sorry, that's just like a quicker way for me to say that. But yeah, basically.
Thank you, Tyler. Ciearra, um, any thoughts that you have to add in terms of your experience with misconceptions about mental health or generally what you've seen? I know that Tyler has expressed that he has had lived experience with OCD, and you've learned more about OCD and don't have it personally. Anything that you've seen in your experience that you'd like to add?
Yeah, so again, because I don't have a diagnosis of OCD, I can't say that I have experienced certain things, but I do know that one of the common misconceptions, like Tyler said, about OCD is, oh, it just means that he or she really likes it clean or likes things in its rightful place. And it's not that. Or it can be seen as, oh, you're just overthinking or you're tripping, you're dramatic, you're too sensitive. It's not that serious. When in reality, what they're experiencing is intrusive thoughts, right? That come with OCD. But a lot of people don't know that they have OCD, like Tyler. And honestly, what I've experienced myself with anxiety growing up, well, I didn't go to therapy and get diagnosed with anxiety or anything until I was 21. So until I was 21, I was battling with anxiety, right? Um, and I didn't know what it was, but I was always told that I was dramatic. You're an overthinker, you do too much, it's not that serious. And it was always just pushed off. And I think that that is one of the biggest common misconceptions is that we're just tripping. Oh, just take, like Tanaye said earlier, pray about it. Sleep it off. You're tripping. You're doing too much. You're sensitive. Like I heard that so much growing up.
Eat something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Literally. So absolutely. I've experienced it and I've also seen it as well.
Thank you. And how do you feel that perhaps being Black has affected you in terms of being self-critical or wondering about your own condition? Have you felt kind of pressured to feel like you can just get over it or tough it out?
Absolutely. Especially me being a believer of Christ Jesus, me being a Christian, I have been my whole life. And so when Tanae talks about the sentiment of just pray about it, do you know how often I've heard that as a Christian? I've heard that so much. And while, of course, God can deliver us from anything, it is very, very important for us to still get professional help. He has anointed people to help us here on earth. So, yeah, I've always felt like, again, until I actually went to therapy when I was 21, that I just had to deal with it. And no one else really talked about whatever I was expressing. Like I was always the overly expressive girl. Like, no, I actually don't feel good. This isn't normal. I'm not about to act like I'm okay. I'm not. And so I did feel very crazy because no one else was talking about it when I was younger. So I absolutely felt alone, and like I just had to be tougher, I guess, because I'm the sensitive one. Yeah, for sure.
And to piggyback off of Ciearra, I've definitely felt that way. In fact, when I was first dealing with like my obsessive intrusive thoughts, they were really scary. I didn't feel comfortable. Not only did I not feel comfortable sharing them with anybody, and being able to get that help from sharing it with somebody, but I would also have this thought in the back of my mind where it's like, you're Black. Like, you need to be better. You need to be 10 times better. Like, you need to be 10 toes down. And that basically just means that, we're not always granted the same opportunities as someone who's a little bit more privileged. So, unless you're anything but perfect, then you don't, like, I would convince myself that I can't go anywhere. Like, I can't do much with my life. I'm this person that has a mental illness, and it's going to hold me back, and I'm a minority, and it just, the list would go on, and I would have all of these just self-deprecating thoughts about myself, which just made my mental health even worse. It was like a snowball effect. So yeah, I've definitely felt that way.
And one topic I wanted to touch on here in terms of how that feels. Um, did you feel dismissed, or did you feel like nobody was taking you seriously? Ciearra, maybe a comment there, or Tanaye?
Did you want to go today?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, dismissal was, I think, a theme. Um, it For me, I lived in a very strict household, so it was all about productivity, getting straight A's, excelling at sports, being the best that you can be. There wasn't room for anything else. So mental health falls outside of what you can see and physically rate and score. And I think that also played a part in how it was addressed. For me personally, I have high functioning depression. So I put a lot of my worth and value and how I perceive myself into my productivity and the outcome of that productivity. So when things didn't go right, or when I didn't get an A, or I didn't pass, or something like that, that would further facilitate my depression or those negative thoughts, as Tyler said. And I think that's something that a lot of Black people go through. We have this idea that if we're not working hard, there's no value in us. If we're not earning, then what is their worth to us? And I think especially historically, as our labor has always been criticized and looked deeply into. I think that that is almost like a generational trauma, community wise, that we still hold within ourselves. We think about how to be the best person, the best functioning adult, without thinking of what that requires internally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely felt dismissed. And I can only speak for myself because I do want to highlight that Black people are not a monolith. So we don't all live the same exact experience. But I know that a lot of us can relate in this way. I felt very dismissed. And to speak to Tanae's point about just feeling like we always have to do something, we also have a hard time with resting because we have to overperform. We have to. We're just conditioned that way. There's a lot of unlearning that has to happen. Um, but for me, in my experience, I extend grace to the people who raised me, my parents, because my mom, she was a single mother of four, right? And so she was always working. And I remember for 2 years straight, we were homeless. And so I think back now on it, like, wow, did she even have the time to try to educate herself? Did she even have the financial support to go and get me the help that I needed? I mean, even still today, we're still working out kinks to be able to afford professional help. So I can only imagine what it was like years ago. So I was definitely dismissed a lot, and I know that a lot of us share that same experience. But now that I'm older and I'm a mom, I can see it from a different lens and I extend grace, not to excuse them, right? Because we're doing the work now to educate ourselves, but they didn't know, right? They were misinformed. They didn't have the communities like Feel Good Babe that Tanaye does or NOCD. They didn't have creators like Tyler and myself on social media at their fingertips to educate themselves. They didn't have what we have today. So they didn't know. And I feel like, at least from my experience, my mom was so focused on like food on the table that I don't really have time to worry about you not feeling good right now or you being depressed. I don't even know what that is. Like, please. So I see it a different way. But again, not to excuse, it's just, I guess, to extend grace.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Um, you've both touched on some really difficult but important points. One around the pressure of excelling and succeeding in the Black community, and that just intense pressure that can almost um, accentuate uh, the mental health conditions, but also kind of be challenging to then address or to take a step to really acknowledge they exist, let alone potentially getting treatment. And then to piggyback on that, Ciearra, your point about um, in some ways how far we've come in terms of access to treatment and resources, but also um, how difficult it can be. It's still, we've got a ways to go. There's still progress to be made. And um, I think recognizing that it is not easy, right? It's not easy to first acknowledge that a mental health condition is happening, that it needs treatment, that it's okay to ask for help, and then to layer on to that kind of the community expectation or kind of the family, even historical pressures that come with that. It can be a really lonely experience, I think, at times. Um, I wanted to switch gears a little bit to talk about misdiagnosis because I think this is a really important topic for mental health generally, but then specifically for OCD as well. I do see a hand raised. If you could please put the Q&A, your questions, any questions you have into the Q&A box at the bottom middle of your screen. We will make sure to reserve sufficient time to answer those. We'd love to answer your questions. So please do submit those into the Q&A box. Um, so on the topic of misdiagnosis, Tyler, you've expressed your experience with several mental health conditions, but then also specifically have lived experience with OCD. I'd love to ask you about why do you think OCD to start, OCD in particular, is often misdiagnosed, especially in communities of color and particularly the Black community?
Well, it kind of just goes back to what I was saying in the beginning. Basically, it's seen as a personality quirk. Oh, you're so OCD, right? Because you like to put all your pencils together in one place, or all your red t-shirts in one place, or all your blue jeans in one place. A lot of people think it's organization. Also, the media is very misrepresentative of it. Growing up, oh my gosh, growing up, when I saw somebody with OCD on television, because I watched a lot of television and movies growing up, a lot. I'm a film nerd. Anytime I saw anybody that was depicted in the media with OCD, it was never what it actually was for me and a lot of other people out there. Um, so, you know, Black people, I feel like a lot of the time we're not as knowledgeable on mental health. And that could be due to lack of resources, systematic racism, things like that. So not only was it misrepresented in white communities from the stuff that I watched, but it was definitely going to be misrepresented in the Black community as well. Um, yeah, pretty much. And my lived experience with OCD, I'm trying to remember the specific question you asked. Like, I got lost along the way. I have ADHD, guys, by the way.
No problem at all. No, I think if you feel comfortable, that's a perfect place maybe to dive a bit deeper is for your own lived experience. Maybe what was your experience with whether that's really recognizing you had OCD or perhaps misdiagnosed OCD. Um, what was it like for you in terms of coming to the realization that you had OCD as well as the diagnosis?
So for me, the realization kind of started a couple years ago. I'm 21 now, but it started a couple of years ago when I would get these obsessive, intrusive thoughts about something about like how I looked or anything like that. And I would ask somebody the same question over and over and over again, AKA reassurance. Um, and every time they answered the question, there was part of me that was just like, no, 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 I have to ask again. I have to ask again. It wasn't enough. Those were the first signs I noticed that there was something off. Because it's so misrepresented, I thought that I had schizophrenia. There was a point in time where I tried to diagnose myself with borderline personality disorder, all of these things that I did not have at all. Um, so I would go to the doctor, and when I would tell them the type of symptoms that I was having, they would automatically write it off as just anxiety or generalized anxiety, which a lot of people with OCD tend to get diagnosed with. Um, but obviously, it was a little different from anxiety. OCD does cause anxiety, but slightly different from just generalized, right? Because it's missing the obsessive thought component. Um, Things got worse when I had a really horrible panic attack. And I think I was just going through a lot of uncertainty at that time in my life, and I think it all just kind of piled up, and then I got really nervous and I just kind of locked up and I was like, oh my God. Uh, and then that's when I started having more like harm, intrusive thoughts and towards myself, other people. Um, for a while, I had schizophrenia, OCD, like I was afraid that I had schizophrenia and just a lot of different things because it plays out in many different themes. So that was kind of my experience with getting diagnosed with OCD, getting misdiagnosed, and I don't know, just kind of figuring out my own way and finally getting a proper diagnosis.
And last follow-up for question for you, Tyler. How important was it to get that proper diagnosis, and how integral to your experience was searching online or finding resources on your own?
It was very important because it gave me insight into what was going on with me. You know what I mean? And to sit back and have all of these intrusive, obsessive thoughts running around in your mind nonstop and then not knowing what it is, you genuinely think that you're insane, that you've gone psychotic, that something, I mean, oh my God. If I would have known that it was OCD from the beginning, the very beginning, when I first started experiencing those symptoms in high school, um, we could have nipped a lot of stuff in the bud early on. So not only is it important for insight, but it's important to nip it in the bud because when I found out I had OCD, I was like, okay, I don't care about anything else. I just want to get better. I don't care. Like, yeah, I'm scared. This is horrible. I'm going through hell right now, but I want to get better, And I guess in some way, shape, or form, earlier we talked about how, like, being Black, it's all about you have to be determined. You have to, so I guess I kind of put that, towards getting better.
Absolutely. I think some common themes that I'm hearing amongst this entire panel, while very different experiences, are um, how important it is to feel some validation, and perhaps that comes from a clinical diagnosis, from having professionals and clinicians that understand you, that really understand your background and take you seriously, to embrace community and find that you're not totally alone. Um, Before we kind of jump into topics like community and how you heal, Tanaye, I wanted to ask you, you have a really unique experience as a model. And I think that that profession is kind of sometimes known for being very demanding, really difficult. You shared a bit about some of your own mental health challenges and experiences. Would you mind just sharing a little bit about how your profession and that pressure to succeed, but also in particular being in a creative industry, one where there's a lot of um, pressure on you physically, maybe how that may have impacted you mentally?
Absolutely. So one thing that many people aren't aware of outside of the entertainment industry is that you're typically a independent contractor, which means that you are not an employee, and therefore you don't have health care. You don't have health benefits. So anything that you are doing to take care of your health is coming out of pocket. So for me, at the time when I started modeling, about 6, 7 years ago, I had just quit my full-time job to pursue modeling full-time. And unfortunately, the pandemic hit not long after that. So Medicare for me was the only way that I could access any type of support. And even that was very difficult to navigate, so much so that I ended up just paying out of pocket. So the expense of getting treatment, getting therapy, whether it be online or through a different resource, is incredibly challenging. Not only is it difficult to find a therapist, because it honestly feels like dating. You reach out to a bunch of different therapists, you send them an email, let them know your situation, then you meet with them for the preliminary interview to see if you're a match, and then from there you determine if you want to move forward or not. It's very complex and it can be very intimidating to people who don't have experience in that field. And I say for modeling in particular, a lot of us are so focused on how we look physically that there's not much paid attention to how we are internally. So yes, you have castings and go-sees where, you're immediately rejected, or you are stacked against other models who look like you or maybe look better than you, depending on whatever the client wants. There's so much pressure to be perfect externally, and there's not much care internally. So one of the things that I did, which I'm not sure is very common with models, is, and I think this is also because I started modeling later in my life at 26. I started being very honest with my agents, like, hey, I'm not feeling well. Or, hey, I haven't received my check yet. It's been 4 months. I finished this job a while ago. I need this money to care for myself. Do you have any updates on where the money is? A lot of us are living day to day or paycheck to paycheck, especially when we're starting at the bottom and working our way up. And there's just not a lot of resources that help not only just models or actors, but those who are independent contractors who are trying to really hustle to get to the next step in their life.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's incredibly insightful, but also such a unique perspective, given kind of the creative industry and what profession, what work, um, these obligations that can come in different forms and different professions perhaps can have different pressures, but they also impact your mental condition and your mental state. And sometimes it's easy to dismiss that, but it can really have uh, be an added factor in terms of how you think about it. So I appreciate you sharing your experience there. I wanted to talk, given that this conversation is really focused on mental health generally and OCD in the Black community, I'd be remiss not to talk about the fact about how important it is to potentially stress how clinicians and the fields of medicine, of care, of psychology have changed over the years, in terms of hopefully where you're seeing a bit more equity and more people, let's say, that look like you or understand your background. Ciearra, I'd love to kind of hear your experience here about as you thought about finding help or seeking a therapist. Has that experience changed over for you over time? And have you ever struggled to find a therapist who looked like you or understood your background? How important was that to you?
I absolutely have struggled. I don't know what just happened there, but I have definitely struggled with finding therapists who look like me and understand my background. Um, I am seeing more of my people in the field, which I am very happy about. But when I first started going to therapy when I was only 21, I didn't have any therapists that looked like me. However, I have had therapists who didn't look like me, but they did understand my background. The same way I don't have a personal experience with OCD, I understand OCD. And so I do believe that you can have therapists that don't necessarily look like you, but understand your background. And also, again, because Black people are not a monolith, you can have someone, a therapist who looks like you and doesn't necessarily understand your background completely. But I think it's important, very important for not just me, but I think a lot of my peers can agree that you just have a sense of, there's a sense of safety. It's easier to trust your therapist when your therapist looks like you, and understands your background. And I think that trust, especially when getting professional help, is vital. It's huge because in order for us to truly get to healing, we have to get to the root of it. And in order for us to get to the root of it, we have to be vulnerable with our therapist, right? So either I have seen amongst my peers, we don't go because we don't want strangers in our business, right? We don't trust our therapist. We don't trust it. So we don't go at all. Or we go and we're not honest. We're not vulnerable. So there's only so much help we can get when we're not being honest. It's very hard to be honest, however, when there's no trust there. And the way for us to combat that is to build the trust. And, you know, feeling seen, heard, and understood is how a person trust, right? And to me, it's been easier for myself and for my peers as well, because I talk about therapy a lot amongst my family and friends. That's the first thing. Maybe you should go to therapy. But it's always like, I don't know. I don't want a stranger knowing my business. It's always about that. And immediately after, it is about access. It's about the financial part of it, right? Being able to afford it. But having a therapist that looks like you and understands your background is important. And I think it ties into trust and getting to the root of it. I can go to therapy for years and not be honest because I don't want to open up because I don't trust my therapist. And I might not even really get the help that I need and not really get to the root of it.
Yeah. I I feel like having a therapist that does look like you and that can understand your background, there's nuances to it as well. Like there's little things. Like if you expressed a specific situation that you went through, um, they can sort of understand like, okay, that was kind of like a little microaggressive, just whatever the situation might be, right? They're a little bit more keen to being able to understand what it is that you're talking about. Um, because I don't think anybody would want to feel gaslit. Not saying that a therapist would do that.
I've
Exactly.
experienced that. So it's happened. It definitely has happened for sure. But I think that that is another thing, even down to like back to going talking about trust. Um, that might be what you need therapy for, right? Like I might actually need to work out why it is that I don't trust anyone who doesn't look like me. And it carries over into every area of my life. So I've had plenty of family and friends who were like, no, I'm not going to therapy because I don't want them knowing my business. That is like, I hear that so much.
Yeah.
But it feels better. You just feel, and I don't know, I feel like if you know, you know, you just feel a little better when you walk in and you see that your doctor is Black, your therapist is Black. You walk in the room and there's at least one or two of you, right? Like I see me here. It just, I don't know, it's just what it is, I guess. Like I don't know how else to explain it. You just feel a little better.
Plus, I think the whole I don't want anybody in my business, that's such a go-to response, but I don't think anybody cognitively actually thinks about that. Therapists keep your information confidential,
Mhm.
literally like get fired or lose their license if they share your information. And then on top of that, this is a person that you're probably never going to see in the street. Every therapist I've ever met, I never saw them on the street. Never did. And even if I did, um, I've discussed with one therapist that, if we saw each other, we just wouldn't speak to each other or anything like that. Like, yeah, it's a stranger, but at the same time, it's like these people are not taking your information and just sharing it with the whole world. Like, I don't think people actually think about that. Like, you're having therapy with one person, they're seeing many other people. I don't know. Do you guys get what I'm trying to say? Like,
No, absolutely. And while this is true, I there is a I feel like historically we have experienced so much, we've been done wrong. So, right, even though technically they should keep our information confidential, we've experienced things where rules were broken and there was no consequences because I'm Black and they're not, right? So it's like a, a police officer shouldn't do what a police officer has done to a Black person, but they do it anyway. So I think that that's the mindset. It's like, no, they're not worried about your business. Like they see plenty of clients, but in our minds, we're not, like you said, we're not thinking about that. We're like, don't want to hear that actually, because we've been done wrong even when we shouldn't have been. So it's still a lack of trust there, I feel like.
there's a lot of layers. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I was just going to jump in and add that there historically is a distrust between the Black community and doctors as well. And because doc therapists are, technically in the doctor realm, it's very hard to bridge that gap for sure.
Thank you so much for adding that. I think an incredibly important point that I think still needs some progress there to be done. We see it across both physical and mental conditions, an inherent distrust, and rightfully so. But I think there have been strides to kind of improve that. Um, I'll take a moment to say, before we get into the conversation about community and how important that is, um, hopefully, not only is this conversation helpful to you all joining on this webinar today, but also that you can hear that this can be very scary. It can be very daunting, and it can also be very, hopefully, in some ways, refreshing to hear that it's not a cakewalk for anyone. It can feel debilitating, regardless of your condition, and certainly to Tyler's experience with OCD, can be incredibly frustrating, right? If you're not convinced that you have OCD or have been misdiagnosed or perhaps confused for general anxiety or panic attacks, it can be really difficult, given Tanaye's experience where you're constantly pushing yourself and have familial pressures and community pressures to truly excel and be the best of the best and feel that you have to power through or struggle through your mental health um, challenges and have heard from Ciearra about like with the experience of being a mom and how difficult that can be to navigate mental health while you're also caring for a little one and kind of putting your motherly duties or your faith first and then trying to also grapple and navigate with what that means as you really sift through what your mental health challenges are. And I think uh, we'll get into, I think, our final point before we make sure we get to some questions, which is the importance of community, the importance of education and awareness, which is why we're doing panels and conversations like this. But also the importance of seeking help. There are resources out there. There is help out there. To Tyler's point, while there may be mistrust and maybe a guarded view toward seeking help, you don't need to do this alone. You don't need to navigate this alone. And regardless of what step you're in the journey, maybe it's just wanting to understand your mental health a bit more, whether that is really in the thick of it right now with something that you're struggling with and not knowing sure what the next step is to take, or whether that's wondering what you have potentially and if maybe it is or maybe it is not OCD or another mental health condition, or realizing that you have a condition and wondering how do you get better? How do you feel like you can get treatment or improve your life and get your life back? Regardless of where you are on that journey, there is help available. And I want to take a moment to share a couple resources before we kind of end on the topic of community. NOCD, we focus on providing help for OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. Within that treatment, we focus on a specialization of treatment called exposure response prevention. And within our sessions with our clinicians and therapists, there is a full comprehensive diagnostic evaluation and truly scientific methods to really help you feel comfortable that OCD is indeed what you have. And if it is not, helping to make sure that you get the treatment that you need. So, NOCD is a place that does have a free community, regardless of whether you are a member with us or not. And so I just wanted to take a moment to share that community with you. It is completely free. Again, you don't need to be a member with NOCD, or you can be, or you may have seen NOCD in the past, but I'll share that link here. You can register and connect with others, feel supported, give support to others. And then separately, if on the topic of diagnoses, if you are struggling with, um, do I have OCD, or I am struggling with mental health condition, I'm not sure if it's OCD, uh, we offer free 15-minute calls in which you can talk to our care team, understand what our treatment and clinical process is about. And if that sounds of interest to you, there's no commitment. It's certainly just to learn more about what we offer. And if that's of interest to you and you start therapy, you can certainly rest assured that you will get a full diagnostic and evaluation for OCD with NOCD. So I will, towards the end of the webinar, add that link as well if booking a free call with us seems of interest to you and that you would like to learn more about NOCD.
And
All righty, moving on from NOCD on to the broader topic, which is about community. I do want to leave a little bit of time for some of the questions that we've received. So why don't we end on this note, Tanaye, if it's okay with you, which is, I know you have Feel Good Babe, your own community addressing mental health and providing a safe space. If you'd like to talk about that, or just more generally, why is it so important to have community and to have events like this?
Yeah, I would say for me, I felt alone growing up. I was the only Black girl in an all-white community, and I always felt like the outcast. And in my diary, I would write that all the time, how I just wanted to finally find my community where I felt like I belonged. My one best friend who I had, we both felt similarly. He was an Albanian young man who also was going through experiences with his identity and his sexual identity. And so both of us trying to navigate this cultural difference and also like trying to just be good, cool students. We found this bond and connection in the fact that we just didn't feel like we belonged. And that was actually the only person who I could truly say knew what I was going through at the time. For all of those years, he was the only person I felt safe enough to confide in, and I can truly say that he's one of the reasons that I'm here today. And so if there are a lot of young people and adults too who have those experiences right now where they feel like they're all alone. They don't know anyone who is going through what they're going through. And in situations where you feel alone, that could be a life and death situation. So community is so important because it can save lives. And so one of the reasons I developed Feel Good Babe is to help young girls recognize that they're not alone. And especially when it comes down to our menstrual cycles and how we feel things at certain times of the month. A lot of times our emotions are in flux. And that can also exacerbate the feelings of depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation. And those are all experiences that I have personally experienced myself. So community is really something that is important for all of us. And I think especially in the Black community. We pride ourselves on cookouts and get-togethers and family reunions. Community is there. But when it comes to the safety that you feel in expressing things that are more vulnerable, the community is hard to find. So I think that there's definitely a gap that we can bridge, and that a lot of organizations are trying to bridge, whether it be access to healthcare, access to Black-focused mental health resources, or just building those communities, whether it be online or in person, where you can sit down with others and just talk about the trials and tribulations of life and what you're going through. There's a huge need there. And then, especially as the depression rates go up across the country, especially in our youth, it's going to be something that we need more than ever, especially as time goes on. So I always encourage people to go to Feel Good Babe, find the resources. I have a bunch of resources for people who are navigating the mental health space, but also just being able to take that one step and reach out to that one person, whether it be a teacher, a guidance counselor, a friend, a dear friend, or even your parent. That one step can really help transform the way that your life lays out, especially when it comes to your mental health. So I always encourage people to try to step into your vulnerability and try to reach out. And if you can't, there's always obviously anonymous resources that you can use. For me personally, I have at one point used the hotline for suicidal ideation, and those are great resources as well. So I think the takeaway that I would love to end this chat with is there's always an opportunity and there's always someone there to help. So even when you feel like you're on your last straw and you don't know how you're gonna get through the next day, always remember that there is a sliver of hope, in knowing that there are people there who are ready and willing to help you navigate through what you're going through.
Yeah. And I just want to piggyback off that community thing. First of all, I need to hop on that. It's called what again? Your website?
Feel Good Babe.
Okay, babe. Yeah, I need to hop on that. Number one. Number two, that is exactly why I love the community thing in the NOCD app. Because before I had even reached out to get a therapist for my OCD, I was able to keep my name anonymous and talk to other people that were also dealing with the same thoughts that I was dealing with. And I know that it can be really hard, especially for Black people, to reach out and get that help and talk to somebody about what it is that they're going through, and being able to keep yourself anonymous and talking to people that are dealing with what you're dealing with, and not having to like talk to someone face to face. It's just so helpful. So, yeah.
Can I just add something? Um, the reason why I feel like, and of course, everything that Tanaye and Tyler said is why I also feel like community is important. I would not have went to therapy when I was 21 had I not had someone hold a mirror up to me. And when you're in the thick of it, it's very hard to see yourself. So when I was going through the postpartum depression, I did not know. I thought I was just very tired. I just had a baby. I'm not in the mood. The baby's always crying. Sleep deprived. I'm not knowing that I'm going through postpartum depression. I actually had a friend. It was the only friend who would come visit me nearly every day because I mean, I was 20, I was 21. My friends were having fun as they should. And so my one friend would always come see me. And one day she was just like, I don't see you. Like, I don't see Ciearra. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, you're different. I'm like, well, yeah, I just had a baby. She's like, no, something's wrong. Like, I think you should go to therapy or try to get help. And she started talking to me about postpartum depression. And in my mind, I'm like, there's no way. Like, that's for like older people. Like, we just never think it's us. And I'm like, there's no way. And her saying that is why I went to therapy. And that is where I realized or got diagnosed with PTSD and anxiety. I wouldn't have known that I had PTSD or anxiety or depression. I wouldn't have known if someone wasn't there to hold a mirror up to me. So I think that's another reason why, because even if it's just one or two people who love you, that are near to you, doing life with you, they can hold a mirror up to you, because it's very hard to see yourself when you are slipping through the cracks.
Wow, what a powerful way to end the discussion. I think such salient and provocative and thoughtful points from each of you. We're so happy to have had you on this panel. We had two questions. We've got 3 minutes, so I think we can address both of them fairly tight and still end on time. The first question is from Matthew, joining from Dayton, Ohio. I believe Ciearra from Ohio. As someone in their late 20s, I am undiagnosed, yet very certain of experiences that have felt like panic or anxiety attacks. How important do you feel getting diagnosed is, or at least examined, and do you feel like diagnosis is taken seriously as a Black person? Is there a space for undiagnosed people to connect with those who have been diagnosed without it seeming insensitive or like a costume?
I think so, most definitely. Whether you're diagnosed or not, if you feel like something is happening internally within you, then there are resources out there that you can go to. There are people that you can talk to. Um, Getting diagnosed later in life, I would just have to say, yes, I do think that it's a good idea to get diagnosed at any age. My sister is 40 and she has really, really bad ADHD, and ADHD comes with a lot of symptoms like depression and things of that nature, and it's really starting to affect her life now more than ever. And she's in her 40s, and we had a long conversation on the phone, and she told me she's going to see a doctor. And I think it's a good idea to still get diagnosed because it gives you a lot of insight into what it is that you're struggling with instead of just constantly thinking, oh, there's something wrong with me or I'm defective. And no, like there's something going on in your brain and that's not your fault and you can get help.
I agree. I think that I think I think it's vital. It gives you language for what you're going through, right? And also the tools. It's very frustrating to feel like something's wrong and you don't know what it is. You're doing all of these things to figure out how to fix it. Nothing's working because you don't know what it is. It's very hard for me to cure, I don't know, a headache if I don't know that it's a headache. I don't know what's causing the headache. It's very, very hard for me to keep a plant alive if I don't know what kind of plant it is, what it needs. It's very difficult. So I think it's vital to get diagnosed just so that you have the language and the tools. You can get the tools to cope with it and get to healing and wholeness.
Awesome. And very quickly, final question. How did you all navigate mental health with roommates or people you were living with? Were they understanding or were there some tough conversations and moments? Maybe a sentence or two. If any of you have had an experience with a roommate or people that you were living with and how you
I had a
had the
couple of
conversation.
run-ins with my mom with that whole thing. When my OCD was like really, really bad, she supported me, but then there were also moments where she would be like, "Ah, just get over it." But it's obviously not that easy. Um, Another tough conversation that I had to have was like whether or not I wanted to take medication, which I know we don't have enough time to dig into that, but we really need to get away from the stigma of, oh, I don't want to take medicine or anything like that. Like, yes, it is your choice at the end of the day, but it has really saved people's lives. And we got to get away from that stigma about medication. So, yeah.
I wouldn't say I had like a roommate or anyone super duper close to me, but I have experienced, I have been on the receiving end of manic episodes, and I did not know that that's what it was. I didn't know that they had a mental health condition. It was very frustrating at first, but again, this is why I think it's important for us to be educated or just to be aware of other mental health conditions, even if you yourself don't have the diagnosis or you yourself don't have the condition, because it helps you understand others and how to do life with them. Because I had no idea how to respond or how to help them, how to show up for them. And it was very frustrating. And how we responded to each other during that time was not healthy because I didn't know.
And today, anything to add from your end there in terms of how to have sometimes the tough conversations about your mental health with others around you or whether that's a roommate, a friend, or a family member?
I like to set the tone when I have a roommate. Hey, sometimes I just want to be in my room, but if you need me, just knock. I think that even if you don't feel comfortable with detailing, your symptoms or what you may have, I think also just helping the people around you know how to navigate you can be very helpful. I've also had, in college, I had a roommate who also was bipolar. And one of the first things she said to me when we moved in together was, Hey, I have bipolar, and I just want to let you know that, like, sometimes I may be more talkative, other times I may not be. And that helped me to also know that it's not me, it's not what I did to them, it's them, and let me just make sure to respect their boundaries while they're going through this time. So I think at the end of the day, especially when it comes to comes to roommates or like living situations where you have someone who may have a mental health condition, communication is really key. And you don't have to be as explicit as, I have OCD, or I have depression, or I have anxiety, but it can just be like, hey, sometimes I just want to be on my own and like, don't think it's you, but like, I just want to be by myself, or sometimes I go silent, or sometimes I'm more talkative, whatever it may be. I think being able to communicate to make people aware or to prepare for what may come is really helpful.
Amazing. Well, on that note, first and foremost, thank you so much, Ciearra, Tanaye, Tyler, for joining us in this discussion today. I hope that you all found this helpful, maybe learned something, and if not, felt some relatable experience from each of their experiences. On a quick note, we hope to do more of these, so please be on the lookout from NOCD on future panels across a array of topics in relation to mental health and OCD. And for those of you in New York, I am based in New York, Tanaye is as well, and we're looking to do some future in-person and meetups here on mental health and OCD as well. So stay tuned. Thank you all so much for joining. Thank you all for your thoughtful conversation, and have a great afternoon.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.